Hello everybody, this is Refresh and I'm here to bring you a battle between the two Innistrad Crimson Vow Commander decks and the Battle of the Horde challenge deck from Born of the Gods. We'll be playing two games against the challenge deck, first on normal difficulty with 3 turns before the Horde attacks and then on hard mode. And for these games we're going to be using 3 hero cards: the Harvester, which says tap, draw a card, then discard a card; the Explorer, which says you may play an additional land on each of your turns; and the Vanquisher, which says your starting hand size is increased by 1, your maximum hand size is increased by 1. We'll go ahead and get started by drawing our opening hands. We have Spirit Squadron here, and we have Vampire Bloodlines right here. Squadron draws a Field of Souls, Remorseful Cleric, Skycloud Expanse, Windborn Muse, Plains, Haunted Library, Twilight Drover, and Mirror Entity. I don't love a 2-lander, but I think we are going to keep it and hope that we can loot into additional lands. Then we have a swamp, an Underworld Connections, a Mountains, a Molecular Blood Witch, a Blood Tracker, a Charcoal Diamond, and a mountain here. There's ramp and things to ramp into, so I think that's worth keeping as well. We'll go ahead and get started. Because this is a multiplayer, we'll open by drawing a card each. Squadron draws a Commander Sphere. Bloodlines draws a Tainted Peak. Go ahead and get started by playing a swamp and a mountain over here, as well as the plains and the Skycloud Expanse over here. Expanse is a land. You can pay 1 tap to add white and blue. Go ahead and tap these to cast the Remorseful Cleric. This is a 2/1 Spirit Cleric with flying, and sacrifice it to exile all cards from target player's graveyard. Here we'll tap these two and cast the Charcoal Diamond. This is an artifact. It enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap it for black. And then we will pass the turn. At the end of the turn, we'll use the Harvester. Squadron draws an island, and we will discard the Mirror Entity. Bloodlines will draw a swamp, and we'll discard the swamp. Squadron draws a Temple of Enlightenment. Bloodlines draws a mountain. We're going to play a swamp and a mountain over here. Over here, we'll play the island and the Temple of Enlightenment. So land enters the battlefield tapped, and when it enters the battlefield, scry 1. You can tap it for blue or white. We'll go ahead and scry the Midnight Clock to the bottom here. Tap 3 over here to cast the Commander Sphere. It's an artifact. You can tap to add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity, or sacrifice it to draw a card. We'll pay 5 and cast the Malclear Blood Witch. This is a 4/4 Vampire Shaman with flying and protection from white. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent loses life equal to the number of vampires you control. You gain life equal to that life lost this way. They will lose 1 life, which means they'll mill 1 card, and we'll gain 1 life to go up to 41. Go to combat and swing with Remorseful Cleric for 2. And then we'll end the turn. We'll use the Harvester. Squadron draws an Azorius Signet, and we will discard the Field of Souls. Bloodlines draws a Molten Echoes, and we will discard the Underworld Connections. Squadron draws a Soul Ring. Bloodlines draws a Bloodlord of Vazgoth. We'll play the mountain over here, as well as a Tainted Peak. This is a land. You can tap it for colorless, or you can tap it to add black or red. Activate only if you control a swamp. We do. Over here, we'll tap the island to play a Soul Ring. It's an artifact. You can tap for colorless. We'll tap the Soul Ring to play an Azorius Signet. This is an artifact. You can pay 1 and tap it to add white and blue. We'll tap 4 mana to cast the Windborn Muse. This is a 2/3 Spirit with flying. Creatures can't attack you unless their controller pays 2 for each creature they control that's attacking you. We're going to go to combat, and we will swing with everything that can for 6 damage. We have an Altar of Mogus, which says when it is put into a graveyard from anywhere, the Horde sacrifices 2 Minotaurs. There are no Minotaurs to sacrifice. A Refreshing Elixir, which says when it's put into a graveyard from anywhere, each player gains 5 life. We have 2 players, so we'll gain 10 life to go up to 51. And we have a Plundered Statue, which says when it's put into a graveyard from anywhere, each player draws a card. Squadron draws a Plains. Bloodlines draws a Stormkirk Occultist. We'll spend 5 mana to cast the Bloodlord of Vazgoth. It's a 3/3 Vampire Warrior with Bloodthirst 3 and flying, and whenever you cast a vampire spell, it gains Bloodthirst 3. Bloodthirst has been activated. And then we'll pass the Horde. The Horde will cast the top 3 cards. The first one is a Reckless Minotaur. It's a 4/1 Minotaur with haste. It attacks each turn if able. At the beginning of the end step, destroy it. A Young Minotaur. It's a 2/2 Minotaur with haste and attacks each turn if able. And then another Minotaur Younghorn. These cannot attack because of the Windborn Muse. The Horde has no mana to pay the attacks. And so the Reckless Minotaur just dies. And then we'll end the turn by using the Harvester. Squadron draws a Plains, and we will discard the Plains. Bloodlines draws a Stensia Masquerade, and we will discard the Stormkirk Occultist. We'll use the Madness ability and tap 2 to cast the Stormkirk Occultist. This is a 3/2 Vampire Horror with Trample, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, exile the top card of your library. Until the end of turn, you may play that card. Squadron draws a Timid Youthful Geist. Bloodlines draws a Mountain. We'll play the Mountain. We'll play the Plains. We'll spend 5 mana to cast Timid Youthful Geist. This is a 3/4 Legendary Spirit with partner with Rhoda, Geist Avenger. Flying at the beginning of combat, tap up to 1 target creature. We'll go ahead and dig up Rhoda now. We'll tap out. Cast our commander, Millicent, Restless Revenant. This is a 4/4 Legendary Spirit Soldier. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each spirit you control. Flying, and whenever it or another non-token spirit you control dies or deals combat damage to a player, create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. We'll spend 3 mana over here and cast Stensia Masquerade. This is an enchantment. Attacking creatures you control have first strike, and whenever a vampire you control deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on it. It has madness for 2 and red. Let's go to combat. We'll swing with everything that can attack. And we'll tap down one of the Minotaur Younghorns. We'll deal 21 damage. And we'll spend 4 mana over here to cast the Blood Tracker. This is a 2/2 Vampire Wizard with flying and black, pay 2 life, put a +1/+1 counter on it, and when it leaves the battlefield, draw a card for each +1/+1 counter on it. We're going to put a counter on each of these vampires, minus the new one. We'll go ahead and pay 1 mana to bump up the Blood Tracker as well. And it also had Bloodthirst 3, so we will be getting 3 more counters to go up to 4 counters. And then we'll pass the turn to the Horde. The Horde casts a Minotaur Younghorn, a Massacre Totem. This is an artifact. At the beginning of the Horde's pre-combat main phase, reveal an additional card on the top of the Horde's library. The Horde casts that card, and when it's put into a graveyard from anywhere, put the top 7 cards of the Horde's library into its graveyard. And we also have a Minotaur Goreseeker. It's a 3/2 Minotaur with haste and attacks each turn if able. Again, they can't attack because of the Windborn Muse, but we can tap one of them down, so we'll do that. We also should have gotten 3 spirits from the combat damage. At the end of the turn, we'll use the Harvester. Squadron draws an island. We'll discard the island. The Alliance draws a Champion of Dusk. Go ahead and discard the Molten Echoes. Squadron draws a Spectral Shepherd. Bloodlines draws a Swamp. Play the Swamp. I think we might have this. So go ahead and go to combat and attack with everybody. Tapping down the Minotaur for 36 damage. Hit a Vitality Salve. When it is put into a graveyard from anywhere, each player returns a creature card from his or her graveyard to the battlefield. We'll go ahead and dump some cards in the graveyard by using the Harvester. Squadron draws a Plains, and we will discard the Rhoda. Blue Line draws a Fire Diamond, and we'll discard the Champion of Dusk. Rhoda the Geist Avenger will enter the battlefield. This is a 3/3 Legendary Human Soldier with partner with Timon, Youthful Geist, Vigilance, and whenever creature an opponent controls becomes tapped. If it isn't being declared an attacker, put a +1/+1 counter on Rhoda. Champion of the Dusk enters the battlefield. This is a 4/4 Vampire Knight, and when it enters the battlefield, you draw X cards and lose X life, where X is the number of vampires you control. We have 5 vampires, so we'll draw 5 cards. We draw a Swiftfoot Boots, a Indulgent Aristocrat, a Rakdos Carnarium, a Vampire Nighthawk, and a Damnable Pact. And we'll also lose 5 life to go down to 56. The first strike would have triggered the increase in counters on each of these creatures. And we will also get 4 more spirit tokens. We get a refreshing elixir. We'll gain 10 more life to go up to 56. And then a plundering statue to draw another card. Squadron draws a Temple of the False God. Bloodlines draws a Swamp. The Champion of Dusk should have entered with 3 additional counters because of the Bloodlust effect. Over here we'll spend 3 mana and cast the Spectral Shepherd. This is a 2/2 spirit with flying and 4 and a blue. Return target spirit you control to its owner's hand. I don't think we need to cast anything else because we have this unlocked. We just have to remove our opponent's creatures. So we will just play a couple more defenders against the 4 creatures that we have. We'll spend 3 over here. Cast the Vampire Nighthawk. This is a 2/3 Vampire Shaman with Flying, Death Touch, and Lifelink. And it has Bloodlust 3, as well as 1 more mana to cast the Indulgent Aristocrat. This is a 1/1 Vampire Noble with Lifelink, and 2 sacrifice a creature, put a +1/+1 counter on each vampire control. It also has Bloodlust 3. We'll play the Plains here, and the Twilight Drover. This is a 1/1 spirit. Whenever a creature token leaves the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on it. And for 2 and a white, remove a +1/+1 counter to create 2 white, 1/1 white spirit creature tokens with flying. We should have gotten a counter when we tapped with Timon, so we'll go ahead and do that as well. And Rhoda could have attacked, but it doesn't matter because we would have done all the damage. I think that's enough for us to win this on the next round. So we'll go ahead and tap out 2 mana to use the Spectral Shepherd's ability to bounce the Windborn Muse. Then we'll go to the Horde's turn. The Horde attacks. We'll run these 4 creatures into the Champion of Dusk, the Vampire Nighthawk, Rhoda, and the Indulgent Aristocrat to defeat all of these creatures. And the Crimson Vow Commander decks will defeat the Horde on normal difficulty. We'll be right back for hard mode. Alright, it's time for hard mode. We only have 2 turns before the Horde attacks. We'll draw our opening hands. Squadron draws a Swords to Plowshares Island, Sire of the Storm, Haunting Imitation, Verity Circle, Temple of the False God, Storm of Souls, and Breath of the Sleepless. It's not enough workable lands here, so we're going to mulligan. Because this is multiplayer, we will get 1 free mulligan. We have Haunting Imitation, Sky Diamond, Timid Youthful Geist, Plains, Custody Squire, Unclaimed Territory, Plains, and an island. We can keep this one. Bloodlines draws a Cordial Vampire, Vampire Dragon, Unclaimed Territory, Camber the Plunderer, Swamp, Falconwrath Noble, and 2 mountains. I think that this is an entirely keepable hand as well. Go ahead and start by playing an island of plains over here. We'll tap them both to play a Sky Diamond. It's an artifact that enters the battlefield tapped. You tap for blue. We're going to play on Swamp and an Unclaimed Territory. This is a land. As it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. You can tap for colorless or tap to add 1 mana of any color, or spend this mana only to cast a creature spell of the chosen type. We will choose vampires. We'll tap them both to play the Cordial Vampire. This is a 1/1 vampire, and whenever it or another creature dies, put a +1/+1 counter on each vampire you control. Go ahead and end the turn by using the Harvester. Squadron draws a Verity Circle, and we will discard the Haunting Imitation. Bloodlines draws a Mountain, and we will discard the Vampiric Dragon. Squadron draws a Hollowed Spirit Keeper. Bloodlines draws a Falconwrath Gorger. We'll play 2 mountains over here, and we'll play another Unclaimed Territory, as well as a Plains over here. We'll tap 5 over here. Cast Timid Youthful Geist. We will have declared the territory for spirits. And then we'll search up Rhoda. We'll spend 4 over here. We'll cast Camber the Plunderer. This is a 3/4 legendary vampire rogue. Partner with Lorien the Diversion and Lifelink. And whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you gain 1 life and create a blood token. We'll search for Lorien the Diversion. Alright, we'll pass the turn to the Horde. The Horde casts a Mogus Chosen, a 5/4 Minotaur, and it enters the battlefield tap, and it attacks each turn of Fable. A Minotaur Younghorn, and a Minotaur Younghorn. We're going to let these two attack and have them run into Timon and to Kambar. We're going to gain 2 life from the life gain to go up to 42. The Minotaurs will die. We'll refuse to use Timon's ability, and we will trigger the Cordial Vampire twice, putting 2 counters on each vampire. At the end of the turn, we'll use the Harvester. Squadron draws a Custody Soulbinders, and we'll discard the Soulbinders. Bloodlines draws a Butcher of Malakir, and we will discard the Butcher of Malakir. Squadron draws a Supreme Phantom. Bloodlines draws a Sinister Waltz. We'll play a Mountain over here. We'll spend 4 over here to cast Strefon More Progenitor. It's a 3/2 legendary vampire double. At the beginning of your end step, create a blood token for each player who lost life this turn. And whenever it attacks, you may sacrifice 2 blood tokens. If you do, you may put a vampire card from your hand onto the battlefield. Taps and attack. It gains indestructible until end of turn. We'll also spend 1 mana to cast the Falcon Wrath Gorger. This is a 2/1 Vampire Berserker. Each vampire creature card you own that isn't on the battlefield has madness. The madness is equal to its mana cost. And over here, we'll spend 2 mana and cast the Supreme Phantom. This is a 1/3 spirit with flying, and other spirits you control get +1/+1. And we'll tap the remaining ones. To cast the Verity Circle, this is an enchantment. Whenever a creature an opponent controls becomes tapped, if it isn't being declared as an attacker, you may draw a card. You can pay 4 and a blue to tap target creature without flying. Go ahead and go to combat and swing with everybody that can attack for 12 damage, with 5 of it being lifelink. We get a Refreshing Elixir, we'll go up to 52, plus the 5 from lifelink taking us up to 57. We hit another Refreshing Elixir, we'll go up to 67. And a Vitality Salve, we'll go ahead and use the Harvester right now to get some creatures in the graveyard. Squadron draws a Reconnaissance Mission, and we will discard the Custody Squire. Bloodlines draws a Mountain, and we will discard the Sinister Waltz. The Salve will trigger. We will pick up the Custody Squire. This is a 3/3 Spirit Cleric with flying, and whenever it enters the battlefield, starting with you, each player votes for an artifact, creature, or enchantment card in your graveyard. Return each card with the most votes or tied for the most votes to your hand. We'll choose a Haunting Invitation. They'll choose a Custody Soulbinders, and the Horde cannot choose. These will come back into our hands since they are tied. We'll also go ahead and bring back the Vampiric Dragon. This is a 5/5 Vampire Dragon with flying, and whenever a creature dealt damage by it this turn dies, put a +1/+1 counter on it, and for 1 and a red, it deals 1 damage to target creature. We'll play the Mountain, and we'll pass to the Horde. The Horde casts a Reckless Minotaur, a Minotaur Younghorn, and another Minotaur Younghorn. These all attack. We'll block the Younghorns with the Vampiric Dragon and the Custody Squire. We'll let the other 2 through for a total of 9 damage, taking us back down to 58. The 2 Younghorns die, along with the Reckless Minotaur. Each of these creatures are going to get 3 counters for the vampires because of the Cordial Vampire. And the Vampiric Dragon will get an additional counter for the one that it killed by itself. Then we'll go to our turn. Squadron draws a Plains. Bloodlines draws a Champion of Dusk. I think we can just win pretty easily by swinging with everything. We'll play the Plains over here. We'll go to combat and we'll swing with everything. That's 43 damage, 8 of which is lifelinking. Whole deck is milled. We had an Altar of Mogus. We will sacrifice the Mogus Chosen. We had a Massacre Totem. We had a Plunder Statue. We'll draw a card. Squadron draws a Marble Diamond. Bloodlines draws a Bloodline Neuromancer. We had another Plunder Statue. Squadron draws a Field of Souls. Bloodline draws a Stromkirk Condemned. And the Horde is defeated. The Innistrad Crimson Vow Commander decks defeat the Horde on hard mode somehow easier than regular difficulty? Let me know what you thought about the games in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. If you'd like to see more of my videos, you can hit subscribe. This is Refresh. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.